Is that how you
I'm the
pronounced it or no?
I mean, I really don't have a specific pronunciation. My parents went with Jorge, so I usually
Jorge,
go with
okay,
that.
that's what I thought it might
Uh,
be.
I'm just the Puerto Rican version of Frank, basically. Yeah,
That's frightening.
that's about as accurate as I can get.
He gives too much. He gives me way too much credit.
It's okay. I'm growing the quarantine goatee, so that's all good.
I like
There
it.
you go.
Yeah, can't
See,
go for the full Corin beard.
well, there's only certain people that can pull that off, and Frank's one of them. Do you have glasses you can wear like he does too? Do you have that? Because that's like
Yeah.
you got to do that.
I need a beanie hat to be like Farlow. Give me a second. If I can find it. All right, there we go.
There you go.
Right. Now I'm full. I'm feeling the Italian in me.
Hey,
There you go.
it's the perfect day for that. We've dropped down to about 36 degrees, 37 degrees.
So over in Baltimore, it remained in the mid 50s, but it's about 700-mile-an-hour winds,
Oh wow!
more or
Oh,
less.
good.
Like there's a backyard, like a little playground behind the apartment, and I'm pretty sure the swing set has been horizontal the entire day.
Wow.
It's been impressive.
Wow.
So, are people listening in Baltimore, Jorge? Are they staying inside and are they social distancing there?
Slowly but surely. It depends on it honestly depends on the county and what their actual numbers look like. Baltimore City, thankfully, has not had as many numbers in terms of cases and deaths and the whatnot. But the end result is that then people are kind of just ignoring the government at will. So you get a lot of examples of people still going out to public parks and going to play basketball or tennis or volleyball and just basically treating this as kind of like instead of the lockdown that it should be more of a inconvenient staycation basically. And on top of that, you have places that a lot of restaurants in the area have gone with a lot of carry out and delivery options to kind of remain open, but at the expense of trying to keep their profits as up as possible, they're being as loose as they can in terms of following the government mandate of the social distancing, the 6 feet and the whatnot, with some of them basically saying, I would much rather have the cash that I'm getting on hand than really caring about the people's health of the food that I'm giving them. So,
Wow.
That's terrible.
yeah, it's. I mean, it's tough. I was actually just on the phone with my parents yesterday, and my parents they live in Puerto Rico along with most of my family, and the case over there has been very interesting, just because in some ways their response has been ahead of what the rest of what the content of what the 48 states have been doing, so to speak, because in their mind their infrastructure just came off dealing with a hurricane 2 years ago, a bunch of earthquakes last year, so really there isn't much room for error, so to speak, in terms of having people flooding hospital beds left and right. So their mandate went immediately in effect. I think talking with my dad yesterday, he said, I think the curfew over there of being, you have to be home by 7 o'clock has been in effect for at least the last 3-4 weeks almost, just because they really want to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible. And even then, they're still getting cases as well, just because as a pretty important stop for a lot of cruise ships, and there's been a lot of talk about how a lot of these boats and pleasure cruises, so to speak, are kind of like these big pods where everything's just getting exponentially worse. So you're playing this catch 22 of, do we let them into our port knowing that there's a high risk that they might carry people that are contagious? Or do we tell them, nah, we got to keep our services and flatten the curve as best we can, even if it means denying care to potentially people that are in these boats. So
Can can you give give everybody an update? How has, because you have family there, how has Puerto Rico recovered from the hurricane? What is like the status? How far? Because it seems like people just decided, well, they're just going to quit paying attention to you, to
Yeah,
everything that was going
I
on.
mean, it already was like a very tough ordeal to begin with, just because when Hurricane Maria hit 2 years ago, the big response was, well, we want to help them, dot dot dot, but the hurricane in Houston just happened, and a lot of the
Mhm.
funding that the U.S. had kind of like allocated for that kind of issue just kind of got poured into that. So it was like, well, you can have the rest, and hopefully it will be good enough to make things work. In addition to that, the amount of blatant just robbery of actual resources for people in Puerto Rico proper was pretty bad. There was a case multiple times, not only with the hurricanes, but also with the earthquakes later on last year, where people were basically going to the places where the ports were dropping off supplies for people.
Mhm.
And people, as long as they walked in with a shirt that somewhat looked like the shirts of, FEMA or any of these organizations, they could basically tell people, hey, I'm getting these supplies. It's an emergency. Just load them on my truck so we can get on our way. And people were just basically taking what they wanted in a very uh, reckless manner. So what ends up happening now is that Puerto Rico basically has had a very slow but steady road to recovery. A lot of it has had to do with just government purging. They were very successfully able to carry out a protest last year where they were able to oust the governor in a very peaceful, nonviolent manner. They were able to get him out. That was very successful. Um, the person that replaced the governor, the new woman in charge, is not quite as effective. I think it's a mixture of both having her hands tied with the opposite party trying to force their issues, plus also just straight being overwhelmed. I mean, anyone in that position
Mhm.
would be when you're basically told, "Hey, we've gone through two pretty bad natural disasters. Your predecessor was incompetent. Here you go, and please know that from the moment you sit down, your every inch will be collectively judged by the rest of the island." It's not a pleasant situation to walk into, but I think overall, as far as everything is concerned, it's one of those where Puerto Ricans are very, very resilient people in general, regardless of what situation they're thrown into. And they most people would probably say that, yeah, it's been a slow but very steady climb, and it's one of those where it will take a while, but they're happy that they're together, that they're alive, and that they can just party on another day. And I think overall that attitude has kind of embodied the Puerto Rican culture. So
Yeah, I was literally just going to say, boy, it really sounds like it's a very resilient uh, island. They
yeah,
lo-
I'm
they
damn proud of
really are.
them.
You should be. You really should be. Um, Yesterday, uh, right before Frank and I got on with our audio pod, we had some interesting developments on the Democratic side of our system, where Bernie dropped out of the race, and
Mhm.
the it looks like Biden is the presumptive Democratic nominee. Now, of course, it's going to have to go to the convention where they make it official and everything like that. But what do you guys think? Frank and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. What do you guys think about the timing? And uh, do you think that maybe there? What do you think um, Bernie's motives were for jumping, bailing out as early as he did? I'll just leave it open for anybody.
I think maybe one of the reasons is you're having a delay on all these primaries coming up. The numbers aren't looking good in his favor. And I think a lot of people are leaning to Biden simply for the fact that he was in a successful administration. He's familiar and they're looking at somebody that's safe and familiar at this point. I think he has succeeded in pushing the Democrats like Biden more toward the left. And I think if he could get in there, maybe with a progressive VP, that possibly when they start getting things rolling the other way, I could see almost having to have a New Deal program next year if the Democrats get in, because this economy is not going to rocket back. You lost 1 in 10 Americans have lost their job in the last 3 weeks, and it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that the timing is a little interesting because, especially as Lou was saying, there's a lot of uncertainty about just the primaries in general. Some states have decided that they need to postpone them. Some states are saying they can't do them at all. And there are others that are saying, we don't care, we're pushing through. So in a sense, it could work out in their favor. If they can kind of get some unionized idea or approach heading into these, then there's a pretty good chance. I mean, if, a fighting chance, which is as good as any, really. I think the big issue is also the current fallout. I would say a lot of the next couple of days are probably going to be a lot of social media shaming of the progressives in general. Just your guy couldn't make it. What's happening? Can we trust him? You know, any kind of number of accusations and exaggerations that will follow. But by doing that now, that means that maybe they do stand a chance that by the time that the glut of the primaries happen, then there is a very real chance for the party to be able to push through with their goals. But again, it's really tough to say just because, you know, there is a lot of uncertainty about just not just the world, but our country in general as well. So
those are good takes. I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I still kind of stick with, even after thinking about it overnight, is that, you know, I believe that Bernie's better advisors, better angels, you know, on his shoulder are giving him the word that with the way things were playing out in terms of the numbers, he really was never going to reach the number he needed to get the nomination, but to make the best influence over the party and to pull it in that progressive direction, even though there are going to be these, I've seen it, you know, it's funny, it's come from the Republican side. It's come from like people like Senator Loeffler, who has like lobbed bombs at the Bernie bros and things like that, and talking about our country not moving leftward because we need to stop the slide to quote unquote socialism. But I think Bernie brings a lot to the table in terms of his supporters and followers, and there's a lot of a bargaining chip with that. And he can, you know, talk to Biden and other Democratic Party leaders and say, this is where we need to go with the party. And one of the things we talked about yesterday too was that the Democrats need to have a very clear message. And one of the clear messages that people really understand right now is we need security of housing, security of finances, security of income, and you know, your entitlements need to stay in place. And the Democrats have always been the champions of protecting those things. They need to kind of center back in on those topics. And it's a topic that is really comfortable to Bernie. So I think he can really preach that message to Biden and talk about how that needs to be at the forefront of the party line as they move towards the general election.
I mean, it could be worse, right? You could have, I don't know if you guys have been able to see this because it's pretty much lost in the glut of all the news, but we could always use a leader like the president of Belarus. Spoiler, he can't. Because in his mind, if you guys have not heard, that country still has everything open to the public.
Oh, wow.
Sports leagues, offices, schools, everything is still going on as planned because according to the president of Belarus, and I quote, the big deal about the sickness is the psychosis that it creates, which I'll give him that. Valid point. Not so valid point, the part where he says that the recovery process for this is as simple as a quote, couple bottles of vodka and a sauna.
You know, I'm on board with a couple bottles of vodka.
Not sure what it will do in the long run, but in the short run, great stories.
Yeah, Yeah, that short run is, is literally hours, but still,
Pretty
hey,
much.
it wouldn't be the first night I don't remember, Um, I find it funny, getting back to the Bernie thing. I'm happy he suspended his campaign when he did. Frank and I, at one point somewhere you can find it, said that we were looking at the end of April. We thought that the end of last week of April, first week of May, I think wasn't that what we said, Frank? It was something like that.
Yeah.
Where he was going to he was going to finally pull the plug. And I'll tell you the truth, I was half being naive, half being optimistic and hopeful because of how he handled the election.
2018.
Yeah, the election before.
Right.
I said yesterday, Frank, that I thought maybe it was had something to do with his health, right? That he bailed out when he did because his health isn't as good as he's letting people think it is. After I thought about it for a little bit, I wonder if he stayed in as long as he could, simply because he didn't like Hillary. It was obvious they don't get along, and they're not very fond of each other. Hillary said something like that on some pod about a month ago or something, didn't she? Where she said no one in the Senate likes him or something like that.
Wow. So personal animus drove him to stay till the bitter end against her just to make her life miserable. Which, I mean, I wouldn't doubt it, but it's an interesting theory.
Pettiness
I
in politics, that never happens.
He hasn't given an endorsement yet, and I can't remember if whose show he was on last night. I don't know if it was Seth Meyers or what's his name? They used to be on Comedy Central.
Trevor Noah.
Colbert. And they asked him, you haven't given your endorsement yet, and he, in a roundabout way, said, "Yeah, no, not yet. We still got a little bit of negotiating to do." So, Frank, we were dead on with that. He's still being the politician, but he did say that himself and Biden and his advisors and Biden's advisors all seem to be getting along really well. They always did, and I'm thinking maybe that's why he got out when he did. I'm not discounting the virus and all the fun the rest of the world's having, to go along with that wasn't a catalyst, but I think that the fact that they get along so well and they're more than willing to listen to each other really made him leaving when he did a lot easier, or a lot simpler for him to do. But was not nearly the animosity that was there 4 years ago.
Do you guys think, now Patsy and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, what do you think the willingness is? And if you want to, however you want to break it down, maybe in terms of percentages, maybe in terms of just anecdotally, what do you think the willingness of those hardcore Bernie supporters is going to be to now turn their support squarely behind Biden because there's no more Bernie?
I'd say very low right now, but that could be another reason he dropped in April, because now you have, 5-6 months to change that attitude. And I think you're still going to have a lot of heartache and hardship coming up in the next few months. And I think really that gives Bernie a chance to sway those people over to Joe. Not saying he'll get 100% of them, because I believe there were some people there that were actually Trump voters that like Bernie's message that may revert back to Trump. But I think by and large, wouldn't surprise me if he got 75%, 80% back in Biden's court. Especially he's going to endorse him, so I think that's going to help.
Yeah, I think it's precisely that. I mean, right now, absolutely not. But when due time and proper build for it, yeah, I think there's a good amount of the votes that can definitely swing that way.
I think once the emotion settled down.
Yeah.
Good boy, I tell you, They were squealing like pigs yesterday on just about every social media platform I could get on. They were just whining and crying like crazy. And I'm not voting for anybody. I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. And I was like, oh my
I
God.
think I remember some of those are the Twitter blowhards, and some of them are, some of them are genuinely hurt, but it is what it is. And I think that, they have to get that out of their system. But I agree with everybody here. And it's funny. I think we didn't talk about this at all. And I don't know if Lou listened to our show yesterday at all, but same kind of numbers. I mean, he's a little bit higher than what I said. I thought, we'd see somewhere between 60 and 75%, probably topping out at 75% of the Bernie supporters will end up pretty fully getting behind Biden. And at the other 25%, some of those may be those Trumpers that go back to Trump, probably a small percentage. Some of them may be people who just go to a third party candidate or just don't vote. But I think we have a different dynamic in this election than the last one, and that may not matter, but that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, it seems to me like this really opens the door for the next Jill Stein, though, too.
Yep. Yeah. Well, hopefully they won't
really
mobilize to really make a difference, whoever that is.
There is a Green Party candidate out there. I saw his name yesterday, but Howie something. Never heard of him before in my life.
No, I never heard of Jill Stein until she ran, though.
Yeah. How are we going to steal the votes?
Very
How are we going to steal the votes?
You know what? That 1% made a difference in 3 states.
It
did.
Hey, turning back to the Baltimore area, only because Johns Hopkins is located in Baltimore, they came out with their numbers this morning, and interestingly, the United States was at about 432,438 cases of coronavirus. I think that was around 10 a.m. this morning that they released that, maybe a little earlier.
No, it's been about 10 a.m. Usually it's the Governor Hogan press conference over here.
Yeah. So far and away, that's the highest number, surpassing every other country. If you look at Spain, Italy, and Germany, combined, the 3 countries, they have less than the United States. Also, what jumped out at me, and I'll give you those numbers, Spain's at 152,000 plus, Italy 139,000 plus, and Germany 113,000 plus. What jumped out at me is South Korea, 10,423 cases. South Korea was hit earlier and initially harder than we were, but their response has clearly been very uniform, very direct from their top down. They've had a system in place. They've had a strategy in place to be able to combat this. The other number that jumps off the page at me, and I don't know the reasons behind this, but Brazil is at 16,238 cases. I don't know if you've kept any of the world news and why this is, Jorge, but or Lou, or Patsy, but Brazil has a very large population, much larger than Spain, Italy, and Germany, and yet they only have 16,000 cases. Is there any reason for that?
I can take a shot in the dark, and I can say they started testing and started addressing this far sooner than we did.
I mean, I know for countries like South Korea and Taiwan, that was definitely the case. Just from the get-go, they adopted very strict policies about people coming into the country and the whatnot. I know, for example, those 2, for example, were very quick to quarantine people coming in, regardless of what manner of travel they were coming into the country. And as a result, they were able to keep their numbers pretty low, even with the rest of their neighbors having pretty high numbers to begin with. The crazy one, which again, I'm kind of patching stories because it's a lot of rumor and mongeries and the whatnots, but the interesting one is the one happening in Britain, just because they have a lot of cases over there. The NHS is supposed to be taking care of the peoples, and interestingly enough, the government over there decided not to provide funding, so to speak, extra funding for people that are in the front lines dealing with the sickness and the whatnot. And yet, interestingly enough, they've decided to give Parliament MPs a 11% raise while they work from home, which,
Whoa.
yeah, which does not look good, not the best. And then in addition to that, you have to consider that their resources are running kind of low, which, they can always just ask their neighbors to help them out with medical. Oh, wait, Brexit. That happened. So suddenly They seem to be arriving really quickly between the rock of Gibraltar and a hard place, and it's gonna jump out of them a little quicker than they think unless they resolve their issues. My roommate Dustin has a cousin over there who's working in that, and he was saying, "Man, wouldn't it be shameful if all of those NHS employees suddenly go on strike just to see what would happen?" Because boy, would
Wow.
that be a problem.
Wow. Well, everybody's hurting for money.
Mhm.
You're the guy that makes the rules.
It would surprise me because the British people are very, also like the Puerto Rican people, very resilient, and in times of crisis, they seem to rally around, in spite of whether they, believe their leader or not. They rally around their own people, and they get a charge out of kind of overcoming the adversity that's in front of them. So while I think that would be a great kind of leverage to hold over people like Boris Johnson, who's been a jackass about the NIH, I just don't see them doing anything like that because of their care and concern for their fellow citizens.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where I think the backlash reaction would be that one, and it's the one that has been seen a lot on social media. But there's a difference between that reaction being talked about and it actually happening.
Right.
Is Boris Johnson out of ICU yet?
No.
Or is he still in there?
Ooh, I think he is, but I'm not entirely sure.
Last I saw, he's still in. He's stabilized, and they say they don't think he's going to have to go on a ventilator, but he's still in ICU.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Wow. Well, he was running around all over the place, shaking hands with everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, Lou, a little closer to home, Allegheny County had some good news that came out. You were setting that around today.
Yeah, they only had 39 new cases today, and they're looking at that on the state level against percentage-wise against like the counties around Philadelphia. And the percentage of cases is extremely a lot lower than the eastern side of the state, simply because Allegheny County jumped on to social distancing and shutting things down earlier than some of the other counties. At a county level, they started in a city level. They were bitching about Peduto, but the mayor of Pittsburgh, but guess what? Seems to have worked. And the proof's proof's right there. Tomorrow will be interesting to see when the new figures come out for there, just to see if it is leveling and starting the trend. But they said from on the news at 5 o'clock before I got on, they're saying that they think the peak in Pittsburgh may be Saturday or Sunday now.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Nick was saying the same thing. My son was saying the same thing. Yeah.
So, you could have a situation where this side of the state gets released sooner than the eastern half, which probably wouldn't be a bad thing because there's nothing in the middle of this state.
That's true.
The way it's spread out.
Yeah. What'd they say? Pittsburgh on the left, Philly on the right, and Alabama in the middle, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Kentucky, yeah.
Yeah, or Kentucky, yeah. Yeah, we've been called Pennsyltucky quite a bit. I think that the population isn't on the western side as much as it is on the eastern side, though, is it?
No, they broke it down by county, and just like city of Philadelphia is 1.1 million. County of Allegheny is 1.2 million, I believe. Then like Bucks County and Montgomery County, they all have 1 million plus in them, and they broke it by county as far as cases, percentage increase, when they were shut down, and things like that.
Yeah. We definitely get a little bit ahead of the game, considering how backwards we are when it comes to things like this.
Yeah, and I just noticed, just kind of comparing, we don't have our southern state partner on today with us, but I just wanted to pick a southern state to kind of take a look at. And Georgia just issued an order to shut down all of their courts. So it's interesting because, of course, it's another Republican governor. but not a Republican governor that's as progressive as Mike DeWine, if you want to call him progressive, or Larry Hogan, who's from a progressive state and has to answer to a lot of progressive legislators in the state of Maryland. The governor of Georgia indefinitely suspended all the court activity. So I find it interesting, and I want to ask you guys a question about that as we move along. But do you think that, I guess first off, do you think that there was, do you think that there was medical evidence, scientific evidence that convinced him of that, or were there other reasons to do that in Georgia?
Do we have any numbers on Georgia?
As far as their COVID-19 cases?
Yeah, as far as increasing and rate of increase, because I'm guessing maybe he listened to some advisors, because that's the same guy that reopened beaches against some of the mayors on the coast too.
Were those the mayors that decided that they were going to just not allow people to park anywhere?
Yeah, pretty much.
That was still the best.
They made parking illegal.
That was still the best.
So Georgia, 10,566 cases. It's on the lower end of, if you look at the stats from most of the states, 379 deaths. It's higher than Florida in that sense, deaths versus confirmed cases, because Florida has 16,364 confirmed cases and only 354 deaths, while Georgia has 10,566 confirmed cases and 379 deaths. So,
I'm guessing Georgia's about 2 weeks behind us too.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
So here's the other question I have for you all. I don't know if you saw this, and this is kind of not a long question, but I guess a little bit convoluted. New York City just issued an order to release about 650 prisoners from Rikers Island because of the concern of COVID spreading within the prison. Georgia says they're closing their state courts, with the exception of if there's warrants that have to be issued or emergency issues that have to be brought up, they'll open the court for that one proceeding, limited, very limited. So my concern is this: if you've got states like Georgia and others that are doing this vis-a-vis where you've got New York letting prisoners out, let's just say you've got somebody that goes in and a warrant is issued for them and they execute that warrant. They open the courts up to execute the warrant. You go snatch that person up, you put them in jail. And then what happens? Because under normal circumstances, I as an attorney can say, wait a minute, my client didn't address that warrant or the issue for the underlying warrant because of their mother being sick, blah, blah, blah. There was some issue with COVID-19. And I would get a court date pretty quickly because of habeas corpus. We're not going to keep somebody in court without having a hearing set up. But the court would be closed generally unless there's an emergency reason or that you have to issue a warrant. So I think it creates this cart and horse thing where, okay, you're going to go snatch people up, put them in jail, but you don't have a way to get them out of jail. And that's concerning to me.
Well, are they doing that? I mean, are they issuing warrants and executing the warrants, or are they issuing warrants and not executing them, or are they not issuing warrants?
That I don't know, because this order just came down and we'll have to see how it plays out. But I can just see in my mind, the concern is, how do I as an attorney articulate, well, you just put my client in jail. I believe it's an emergency for you to reopen the court so that we can go argue why he should be released or she should be released.
And I think that's a legitimate argument. I don't think that's a stretch by any means. Boy, that's interesting. That's interesting. I would think that if they're going to open the courts, they have to, even if they're doing it, and I'm just talking, even if they're doing it on a emergency basis or on a very strict reason to do it, that they have to follow. They still, if they're going to recognize that the court is open or in session, or however you say it, Frank, then they have to abide by the laws and the rules that are applied to that court, regardless of, it's, you can't, my point is, you can't just be like partially open, right? There's not a woman in the world that was ever, partially pregnant, right? She either was or she wasn't. If your court is active and it's going on, it's open, as you said, then it has to be open all the way.
Yeah. I'll give you a couple other quick examples from the legal standpoint. So there's very few things that are as hard and fast as a statute of limitations. Okay, either whether it's criminal or civil. Okay, statute of limitations, I think we all know, basically is after a certain amount of time passes from the incident occurring, you have a certain amount of time to bring a case. Jorge used to work in law office too, so I know he knows some of this stuff. But a lot of other things can be pushed back. Hearing dates can be pushed back. Timeframes to answer interrogatories, to do discovery, they can all be pushed back. And the courts are going to be very flexible with attorneys on that. But right now, let's say I've got a case that's going to, the statute of limitations on a civil case is going to end May 1, or let's say April 20th. Okay. If I've got a court that accepts electronic filing, I can certainly file that electronically and protect the statute date. But if I'm in a jurisdiction or a venue that doesn't accept electronic filing, and there are some counties in Maryland that do not accept electronic filing, and some of them do. If I stick it in the mail and their courthouse is closed, does it get time-stamped? Do I get to use the envelope that shows my mailing was mailed on April 8th as opposed to April 19th, the day before the statute runs? So it's going to create, I just think it's going to create a lot of issues, you know, when everything starts to resume and go back to normal again, quote unquote, go back to normal again. There's going to be a lot of arguments about these kind of issues. And then I wonder about how, you know, courts are always backed up to begin with. How much is that going to back up the court system?
I sure as hell hope whoever decided to do this, have these courts set up the way, you know, you said. I sure hell hope they thought this thing through about how they were going to handle these things before they pulled the trigger on it. I really do, because boy, this is going to be a mess if they do. It's going to be a mess anyhow, but at least they have some sort of guidance that they could go by. If they didn't think this thing through, boy, this is going to be terrible for everybody. It's going to be terrible.
Yeah, well, on the one side, you've got protections in place because of renters in certain jurisdictions. Maryland has definitely put in place a moratorium on evictions. So there's a good side to this because obviously people are out of work, they can't afford to pay their rent, and they're not going to allow landlords to come in and evict them while this crisis is going on. And courts aren't open to accept the evictions. So that's a good side. But then the bad side is, what if I've got a client that I just got a call the other day, actually this morning. A woman was working in a hospital. She was working as a receptionist and intake person. And she was in that position because she was unable to do bedside nursing care for 10 years because of a medical condition she had. They told her, due to circumstances currently, we need you on the front line. You need to move off of intake and come to do bedside nursing. She said, I can't. Medically, I can't do it. And they said, well, then you're of no use. You need to go home. You're terminated. So
Yikes.
normally somebody like that, I would say, okay, let's we'll file a lawsuit under the ADA. We'll make sure that your reasonable accommodations request is in order. Make sure your medical issues are outlined clearly for your employer. We'll send them a letter and we'll file suit and file for the court to immediately try to intervene to keep her at work because of the situation that's going on right now, pending the outcome of the trial. Now, there's no court open to do that with. There's no judge to go to and make that a kind of argument. So you can certainly preserve the case by filing it, but you're basically telling somebody, not only are you going to be waiting for a decision on this case as it normally would have taken due course, but you're sitting home out of work, waiting indefinitely to even know when your case is even going to be accepted to be filed. So it's rough.
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you this one, Frank. What do you think? What do you think they should do? I'm sorry, Jorge.
No, I was, by all means, go ahead, Frank.
Well, I think that we need to, like you were talking about, Patsy, a little bit about figuring things out. This is unprecedented. We don't know. We've never had to deal with this on such a large scale. I think what they need to do is probably have some resource set up where there's things done electronically, like we're doing this right now, where there is some kind of calendaring control, where they say, we're going to have weekly check-in meetings with all the attorneys who have cases filed, and this is what we're going to do, so that you have a case number. Here's what we're going to do with your case. If we need to have some kind of discovery started on it, we'll make sure that you have a discovery order in place, so that you're telling your opposing party, within reason, you have to complete your discovery by this time. So it keeps moving cases along, so that we're not just sitting here indefinitely in limbo. In that way, when we do come out of this, we can have cases ready to be tried, cases ready to be heard, ready to be disposed of if they're no good. The other side can file their motions to say these should be dismissed. That's my initial thought. Jorge, what were you going to add to that? I'm sorry.
No, my comment was going to be completely inane. I was just saying that, if Zoom really wanted to get their product out there, they could have done better than to start an outbreak.
It was a creative way to do it, though, wasn't it?
I mean, look at all the trolls we're having in the courts. I'm blaming Zoom. By the way, Zoom, great product. Thank you for hosting this podcast. But
and obviously all of our information is being sold to Facebook, so
yeah,
but,
data mining and all that.
Yeah, that's okay. If they're not giving it to them, somebody else is.
Being that Zoom does have a time limit, and we're probably running right up against that in about 3 minutes, might be a good time to say some final words.
We'll start with Lou. How's that?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I was listening to the legal arguments, but boy, he brought up a lot of good points. And, I'm not sure. I'm guessing Trump's on right now for one of his MAGA rallies that no network should be carrying from now on, as far as I'm concerned, especially in light of Pence not allowing health officials to appear on any networks, for the real updates and the real truth going on. One thing I know, if I was Biden running this year, I'll tell you one thing I'd pound from now till then. I'd cite this virus and the need for updated national health care of some type, because you're in a backup system for social backup just for the general populace, because you're going to have people that are going to be hit hard with this. And really, what's $1,200 to somebody that
Nothing.
maybe was working? I don't care if you lost your job and what were you making. I mean, by the time this is over, they're going to want back rent, everybody. They gave you a reprieve now, but utilities are going to want their back pay. The landlord's going to want his back pay. You're going to have back taxes if you haven't paid them on your real estate. So I could see a lot of different arguments coming out of this in the long run. That's including if the economy isn't in a genuine crapper by then.
Well, you got to hand it to Trump. He's the first Republican to totally tank an economy in his first term. So, salute. And, also the first president to be impeached in his first term. So, fucker's batting 1,000.
He's number one.
I tell you what, he's definitely an overachiever. I can tell you that. He is the stable genius. No one else on the planet could have pulled this shit off. Jorge, any last words before we stick a fork in this thing and let it die a natural death?
I wonder if he's frozen there.
Yeah, he might be. He's not moving at all. Oh, there he goes.
I think I'm back now.
There you go. Yeah, you're back now.
Yeah,
and on my screen, you and Frank flip. So, boy, I'm glad we're getting out of this, because this is going to confuse the hell out of me. I just have to look for the full beard, I guess. He froze again.
I think it's that wind that's whipping around Baltimore. If he comes back on, we'll hear from what he has to say, and I hope he does, because he's always got the good anecdotal humor for us to wrap things up with. I want to say thank you to both Patsy, all of you, Patsy, Lou, and Jorge for doing this today, and hopefully we can do it again tomorrow. Hopefully I'm sure we won't have a shortage of things to talk about. I'm concerned that we are not still seeing any kind of real leadership and direction from our federal government on this. it concerns me because there's so much misinformation and so many people that get hurt by that. And it's not just the people that believe the misinformation, it's the people that they're going to spread it to, that they can spread it to as well. So I just hope people get the clear information. Jorge's rejoined us. Hey, Jorge.
Hey, sorry about that. My computer decided to kick everything off.
It's okay. Liz was doing that for 2 days.
Working fine today.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
right, I shouldn't say today. I should say right now. Earlier today, it wasn't. Comcast.
well, I guess it has a choice, right? And it chose your other one for 2 days. Now you're going to be with this one for 2 days.
Yeah.
It's even that way. Jorge, anything before we let this thing die?
No, yeah, I
Used
wanted
to.
to thank you guys for having me. It was a lot of fun. I think a lot of clear plans came out of this. I think Frank needs to stop lollygagging and just run for office. Just
Hell
do
yeah.
it. I don't know why you haven't yet.
Frank,
I mean, geez.
I'm telling you, I know lots of people, man. We can take care of those ballots. It's no problem. We can.
Yeah,
we need to
we're
run him
good,
against Mike Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I work security for a couple of his rallies. I know we're on the
rallies.
time,
I'm
but
not surprised.
oh my God, what a piece of work this guy is. I'm honest to God, what a piece of fucking work this guy is.
But no, yeah, Frank needs to run for office and stop eating bats. Eating bats is bad. Just not a great idea. Just.
I only eat aluminum ones.
and I think that I think we should officially move to COVID-19 is way too hard of a title to make into a song. The only thing I can come up with is "Come on Eileen," but instead COVID-19. So
That's
because
brilliant.
of that, I think Kung Flu is a much easier name to go with because it started in China. No, my last actual words though is that my buddy and I were actually talking the other day, and we came up with a couple of songs that are very, very Disney friendly, but also COVID-19 friendly. To give you a bit of an example, I'll give you the chorus of the famous Aladdin song, "A Whole New World," and I quote, "A whole new world, a shining place that we just cleaned. No one to tell us no or where to go, because they're all alone. A whole new world, a dazzling place we speak by Zoom, because now from way up here, it's crystal clear that we are in a whole new world alone."
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Frank, you need to you need, if you got your guitar a day early, you should have had it today.
Yeah, I should have. And Jorge and I'll compose the music behind that, and he'll sing it because Jorge has a fantastic singing voice. So we'll get that out there at some point.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll get the rest
business.
of the Disney social distancing CD.
See, we will definitely have the band back together.
I liked Corona because it was like, my Corona. When you gonna give me some of that puff Corona? I don't know. There's just a whole bunch of things we can do with it, but
Usually I did that one with the beer, and it would be "She Looks So Hot After 9 Coronas." Made it way easier. It's visually more pleasing after 9 Coronas.
You see how this works? I'm usually the straight guy, and Jorge's the one that knocks him down. So.
That's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
I'm Puerto Rican Frank. I got a legacy to uphold.
We said, Jorge, you got to get the full beer going, though, man. You got to,
Yeah.
you got to do that. I think
Fair
get
enough.
the glasses. I can't.
I'll let the scruff start
you
coming in a little more.
I think tomorrow we'll all wear beanies too, just to. Okay, folks.
A beanie to wear.
Yeah, well, Lou doesn't live too far from me. I got a bunch of them. I'll just drop one off to him. It'll give me a chance to get out of the house. I'll just leave it in your driveway, and then I'll leave. That way you won't have to come and cry. We got to do that. I know we got to go, but the company that I work for, we actually have 3 buildings. Okay, we have 2 in Shinego Township and 1 in. You'll know where any of that is, but these other guys do. And we can't go into each other's buildings, right? I mean, we manufacture in 3 buildings, and we can't go like I'm in the one downtown, right? I'm in the one on Moravia Street. I can't go to either of the ones in Shenango Township. If I have to do something, if I have to drop something off or pick something up, you literally put it out on the porch, out in front of the front door, and then you leave, right? And you pretend you're Amazon. You take a picture of it, and and stick it up on the site so people know it's there. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to do that and just like put these metal pieces in a bag and set it on fire and knock on the door and run. See if anybody would do anything. Just take a picture of it and say, tag you're it or something like that. I don't know. Anyhow, folks, thank you very much for you guys sharing your time with us. We're a bunch of knuckleheads trying to get through this. We'll see who comes on with us tomorrow. Obviously, like we always say, the more the merrier. So don't think that just because there's 4, you can't jump in. 6, 8, 10, 12 of us. Boy, that'll be fun.
Don't forget, Natal 2024. I'm in.
Yeah, I think we should start now. 2024. Frank, buddy.
With or without his consent, his party has started.
As long as we have kind of a mediocre presidency in 2020, I'm okay, because I don't want to be like that lady that had to follow the jerk in Puerto Rico. If you got to follow the jerk, Trump, it's really bad. I can't.
Well, you know what they say? You never want to be the guy that replaces a legend, right? You always want to be the guy that replaces the guy that replaced the legend.
Exactly.
Okay, folks, if you like what you heard and like what you saw, please join us again tomorrow. Same bad time, same bad channel. And if you're really generous, please think about supporting us on Patreon, because God knows we need the money. So for all of us, all I want to say is thank you guys all so very much for helping us out, for joining us, and we will definitely see all of you tomorrow. So goodbye. God bless and take care. We'll see you tomorrow.